Oh, can you hear me, Laura?
Yeah, sorry, I just muted myself. We should be recording. Is that everyone? Can everyone see a message? Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. I can just see it popping up now. So thanks very much for that. Well, actually, I'm just going to go back to an earlier slide and recap on what we're going to be covering this afternoon. As Laura said, this morning was very much about laying some foundations for running a crowdfunding campaign. So coming up with your project idea, deciding some key characteristics for your campaign, and then choosing the right platform. And this afternoon is very much about launching, running, and wrapping up after a successful campaign. So I'm going to be talking about creating your campaign content and your campaign page, how to sow the seeds and build excitement before you go live with a campaign, launching it with a splash, keeping people engaged throughout, and then following up afterwards. And just a reminder again, we'll be taking a break about halfway through the session, probably about 2:45 or something like that. If you have any questions in the meantime, pop them in the chat box. Laura, let me know if there's anything urgent coming in, and if not, we'll stop at set points to answer that. So bear with me. I'm now just going to scroll through all of my slides from this morning to get to the right point. I'm going to be talking about a few things you can do to design the best possible campaign itself. And obviously this is going to be drawing on a couple of the successful campaigns I mentioned this morning and all of the preparation work you'd have hopefully done by this point to decide which project to focus on and flesh that out. So a campaign page is going to be on whichever your chosen platform is. It's going to be the page that has all of the information that donors need to read about your organisation and about the project you're focusing on, and then they'll be able to stay within that page to make donations towards your campaign itself. So I think in addition to some of the content we've already been talking about, three things that are really important, and some of this touches on the campaigns I mentioned this morning: a catchy, memorable and emotive title, so something to really align and draw people together around your campaign, something that has a call to action in it. One of the campaigns I worked on recently that I mentioned this morning, which focused on converting an unused car park space into a garden and with raised beds and something for the community, was called something like creating a shared space for art and nature or something like that. So a title that kind of clearly explains what your campaign's all about and ideally nudges people towards taking action as well. So if you can make that as vibrant and dynamic as possible, that's even better. Imagery we talked about this morning as being really important as well. So if you can find images to support your campaign that are eye-catching and the type of images that fit well on social media, that catch people's attention in a busy news feed, that your supporters are likely to want to share with others, then even better. Obviously, the example we used this morning was cute puppies, which work really well, which might not be an option for everyone, but try and think about elements of your work that sort of play really well in that regard. If you are all about creating a green space, then photos of that in the sunshine, looking enticing and appealing, etc., will be really good as well. So imagery is really important. I think a lot of people make the mistake with a crowdfunding campaign of working on their written text and spending most of the time on that written blurb, and then at the last minute they think about things like the title, the images, and putting together a video. But actually, if you think about how we all engage these days, particularly on social media, we see so much text and scroll through so much written information, and it's actually the catchy titles, the imagery, the video that really stands out there. So I'm going to play you, this is always a bit of an experiment and I'm hoping it's going to work correctly. I'm going to try and play you a short video of a crowdfunding campaign that was put together a little while ago by a butterfly conservation charity that's just a couple of minutes long. I'm hoping the sound will play okay through Microsoft Teams, and then after I've shown that to you, I'm going to mention a couple of things about what I think makes it a strong video and how it's something how you could go about recreating it for your organization. So if you bear with me 1 second, I am going to, Laura, for some reason, the option I had previously to share with sound on doesn't seem to be here because I'm through a browser now because I didn't have a login. So would I be able to send you the video link and see if you could play it with sound from your end, please?
You can, but I've got my earphones in, so I don't think it's going to let me because of my earphones. But hang on a minute, let me see if I can open my laptop up and try it that way.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Of the video in the main chat box for now. If everyone else could just leave it for now, don't watch it yet, because we're going to try and play it for everyone together.
I wonder if I can link. No, that's just playing it for me.
Normally, what I would do is play it in YouTube, just in a browser, and then just share that window with everyone, if that works.
No, it won't let me because I've got my earphones in.
Okay, that's a shame.
Hang on a minute. Let me see if I can do it.
We did test this morning, everyone, but it seems to have changed since then.
Just trying to think if I can. I can't even get it going on my laptop now. Hang on. Won't let me even do it on my laptop. Hang on. Sorry about this, folks. Just take. Oh, has that completely got? Hang on. Can I? Right. Sorry, I'm looking at a different. I've took me. Hang on. Let's try it now. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Right, okay, let me do it now. I've took my earphones out, so let's see if it works now.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Okay. Speakers. It's still saying I've got my headphones in. No,
okay.
It's not going to work, Mark, I'm afraid.
No problem. What we might do, I'm sorry about this, everyone. It's just not letting me play things in the same way it did this morning, frustratingly. I'm gonna put the link in the chat box. I'm gonna give everyone just 2 minutes to watch that video, if that's okay. And then I'm going to comment on a couple of things about it. So the link is there now. If you just take a couple of minutes to start it as soon as possible, and then maybe pop a message in the chat box when you've watched it, we'll restart again as soon as possible. So I hope everyone's had a couple of minutes to watch that video now. Sorry we couldn't get it playing in one place for everyone. Two things I wanted to highlight about that video, which I think are great. Firstly, you'll see that it's not particularly high tech. I think sometimes when people are tasked with creating a video for a crowdfunding campaign, they're worried that they're going to need lots of high tech editing skills and lots of equipment to record it in high res, but that was a mixture of footage shot, I believe, on smartphones and then mixed with some stills of video and put to music. So you are possibly going to still need some technical expertise to be able to do that, but it is designed to be really straightforward. And something we often say as a tip, so for those of you that have individuals or companies who support your organization, it might be possible to speak to a local company with some video editing expertise to just be able to help a little bit with some of the editing, but it doesn't need to be hugely complicated. And I just think it's a lovely message to support a campaign that makes so much more impact than just having written text on a campaign page. The second thing I really like about it is there's an element of bravery in giving most of the video time over to the kids. So I think if you were to pitch the idea of a video to your CEO or someone like that and say, actually, we don't want the directors or anyone senior really saying too much at all. We want it to all be about the kids talking about the campaign themselves and what they gained from the project. I think some people can be a little bit worried about doing that, but I think having that message told in the voice of the kids just adds a kind of real infectious enthusiasm. I've seen a couple of people commenting to say it was really cute, it was really lovely, and lovely to hear the kids talking as well. And I think that's exactly it. You're hearing directly from the people who are benefiting from the project, and that has so much impact. So it may or may not be possible to make use of children in the video that you're putting together for your campaign, but maybe just think about how you can involve people at a grassroots level who are sort of able to talk about what the campaign means to them and the impact it has. So I'm just going to put my slides back up and continue from there now. Bear with me 1 second. So yeah, as I said, a catchy title, eye-catching imagery, and a short video that tells your story quickly and clearly is really, really important for grabbing people's attention. And this links on with what I've just said, but the second tip I'd give is really involving the people who benefit from your campaign. So what that Munching Caterpillars video does is it shows how the project that is being fundraised for is so valuable for the local community and the people who are going to benefit from it. If you can involve the people who are going to benefit from your project in the planning of it and in the actual asking for money, then that can have a huge positive impact. And yeah, again, as I say, sort of encouraging people to tell their story and their experience with your project in their own words adds a real authenticity to what you're doing as well. Having grabbed people's attention in the first place, it's then important that you have some substance to back it up. So the following things aren't necessarily going to be at the top of your campaign page, but they're going to be in there somewhere. So have a written blurb explaining more about your project, but make it as concise as possible. Again, I've just put in small print in the bottom right hand corner the Pupmobile example from earlier. So 5 bullet points saying why we need a new van to transport puppies around, and 1 line at the bottom saying why it's really urgent to do it now. It's not loads and loads of text, but it just gives a bit more information about your project. Also, as I mentioned earlier, include a clear time frame and a brief budget. I think those things help to show transparency and again build trust with donors. So say, we're going to start planning our project on this day, we're going to start the building work at this point, it's going to be finished by this day, it's going to open by this day. And if you can include a bit of information about how much you're looking to raise, even better. So if you set your fundraising target at £10,000, let's say, how do those costs break down between staffing costs and other materials you might need, building materials, equipment, venue hire, whatever it might be. I think explaining that budget is really, really helpful as well. And try and finish with a clear call to action as well. So if people have scrolled all the way through to the bottom of your campaign page, having a sentence at the end that says something like, So now please make us help this a reality by choosing to donate £10 today or £50 today or whatever it is. So it finishes with a really strong call to action as well. And the final thing I wanted to mention, again, this is all about trying to convey as much information as possible, but without too much written text that people do get turned off by. So being able to use things like statistics, diagrams and infographics on your campaign page are really helpful as well. So an infographic is basically a graphical layout. It can be a chart of some kind that presents information in a more palatable and concise form than written text would be. So the example I'm going to show you now, it wasn't actually from a crowdfunding campaign as such, but it was from a fundraising campaign done by the charity WaterAid a few years ago, called The Big Dig. And they basically managed to put together an entire fundraising campaign in about 50 or 100 words. And it was a long sort of rectangular graphic. So I've got the first half of it on one slide and then the second half of it in a moment on another slide. So they were looking to raise money to dig new boreholes to provide people in Malawi with clean drinking water. And you can see they have a few statistics there about the average life expectancy, the percentage of people in the communities they were supporting that didn't have access to a toilet. They said 1 in 5 people don't have access to clean, safe water. And this was all illustrated with some really clear diagrams. There's not a lot of text here at all, but it's very visually engaging. And they said this summer, WaterAid has big plans for Malawi. We're going to dig 7 boreholes. And we're going to construct 1,200 toilets and install 1,200 hand washing facilities, again illustrated with those graphics. And then they had a section on the difference and the impact they were going to have. So they said over 134,000 people in 2 communities will have access to fresh, clean drinking water for the first time. And then what I really liked about this, to give it a sense of urgency, they said we need to act quickly for 2 big reasons. So firstly, and I appreciate this isn't the lucky position that most organisations will be in, but they'd managed to secure some match funding from the UK government. So they said every £1 you donate before the 18th of September will be doubled by the government. And secondly, they said we need to start building work before the rains come in Malawi in November, because obviously beyond that point, it would have been impossible to start the construction work in the rainy season. So there was a very clear message to say, you know, don't just support this campaign in general, but we need you to support it now. And again, as I said a moment ago, it finishes with that really clear call to action, because it says, donate today and watch as you transform people's lives. So if I put the first half and the second half of this up again, you'll see that really this is an entire fundraising campaign told in about 40 or 50 words. Most of it is imagery. There's lots of space there. There's lots of use of big fonts. I think this was already a few years ago now, so graphically it might start to look slightly dated, but it's an example of the type of thing you can do to just avoid having paragraphs and paragraphs of text. And I think it's amazing that they really managed to cover everything that we talked about earlier in the case for support. You know, you've got the need, the solution, the impact, and why you need to act now, and they've done it in no more than about 40 or 50 words in total. So I think it's a really nice example of a concise fundraising campaign and what you can achieve if you use infographics as well as text. Now, for those of you that were on the training last week as well, you have probably heard me mention Canva, spelled Canva. Laura, I don't know if you could put a link in the chat box again, possibly, please. It's a website you can use even if you don't have a lot of technical design skills to create graphics like this one, where you can put together different charts and little images and create something a bit like this. And its basic option is free for not-for-profits as well. So Canva, which I know a few people recommended last week, is a program that's well worth checking out as well. And finally, I think do what you can as well on your campaign page to just bring what you're doing to life. So if you're looking to buy specific pieces of equipment, then include pictures of what it is you're looking to buy. If you're looking to do architectural work, then include a sketch from the architect to bring your work to life. And in the bottom right hand corner, this is an example of a crowdfunding campaign done a little while ago by the Abergavenny Lido group. So they were looking to create a new public Lido or extension to their swimming pool. Obviously, it hadn't been created yet, so they couldn't show pictures of it, but they got an artist to do a basic sketch of what it would look like. And all of these things, they take a little bit of time, they take a little bit of money, but they allow you to really bring your campaign to life a little bit more. So Laura, I just wanted to check before I move on, have there been any questions or comments that have come in at this point, or shall I keep going?
Not at the moment, but I actually love that infographic of the short water aid campaign.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can actually see the steps. That's need, that's impact, that's why act now. Because the problem, and I mentioned this last week, the problem us heritage geeks have is we just have the curse of too much knowledge. We are so passionate about it, but we just bombard people with the history instead of just really picking out what people need to know.
Yeah.
So to do that and to really think of what am I trying to achieve and how can I squeeze it into that so people just get it as soon as they look at it. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think it's really easy to think that you're strengthening a fundraising campaign by adding more and more information, but sometimes all it does is make people confused and lost in the detail and overwhelmed, exactly as you say. So I think sometimes, part of what we're talking about here, I guess, is bravery. In one example, I said it was being brave enough to let the children you support tell your message for you. And the second example is being brave enough to just share enough information, but not overwhelm people. And I think that can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, fantastic. So three golden rules I just wanted to share as a reminder that you should be using to test any of the content you put together for a crowdfunding campaign. It should be as engaging as possible. It should be authentic, and it should be designed to be shareable. So it should be content that makes people not only want to donate themselves, but then put something on social media to say, I've just supported this campaign. Would you be willing to do so yourself as well? And at this point, I just wanted to mention, apologies, this is a bit of repetition for people who were also on our course last week. I'll put the link in during one of the breaks in a little bit, but we launched last year a podcast series as well, exploring kind of niche topics for fundraisers. And we did an episode in that all about the science and the psychology behind giving money and what makes donors want to donate to a particular cause and whether they respond better to a crisis or positive messaging around something they can change in their communities. And we've got a 45-minute episode all around sort of how to design the messaging for a fundraising campaign as well. And so if you are looking to launch a crowdfunding campaign soon, I'd recommend you have a watch of that as well. I was on that episode, but it was me interviewing someone who's actually done a PhD in neuroscience and the psychology behind decisions that donors make. It's well worth a listen. It's a really fascinating chat that we had. So at this stage, we're on to running your campaign itself. But actually, before you throw it open to the mercy of your newsletter subscribers and your social media followers, we recommend you do what we would generally call a soft launch of your crowdfunding campaign first. So crowdfunding campaigns are actually much more likely to be successful if you've got a clear plan in place up front, and ideally if you've already raised up to 50% of the funds you need before you launch. Now, you might be thinking about that and thinking, well, how on earth am I going to raise the money before I launch my campaign? But really what we're talking about here is a soft launch you do with your best donors, your most loyal supporters, to try and get that campaign thermometer that gives an indication of the progress you've made, edging up towards 30, 40, 50% before you actually launch your campaign. And then when you send the details of your crowdfunder to everyone else on your mailing list, they click on it and they think, wow, it only launched yesterday and it's already doing so well. It's already so far along towards its fundraising target. And it's been proven in fundraising. I think people like Just Giving have done research to this effect. That thermometer on your fundraising campaign makes such a difference to people's decisions to donate. So often people are reluctant if they see that you're 1% of the way towards a massive target. people just look at that and they think, oh, I'm either not going to donate because it doesn't look like it's very successful, or I'm going to wait and come back to it in a few weeks. Whereas if they already see you're a way towards your target, people are far more likely to make a donation. So maybe see if you can try and secure either some upfront donations or at least some pledges, but from your best supporters and your best donors before everyone else gets to see your campaign. And one of the things you can do to identify those people is do a quick exercise that we call a network mapping exercise. So maybe start with your previous donors, people that either give on an ongoing basis to your organisation or have done in the past, and then work backwards to maybe people that have come along to your events and shown enthusiasm towards your work, contacts of your staff and trustees, and then other sort of professional and community contacts in your universe, in your network that you exist in. So kind of working backwards from your top donors. So when we're working with an organisation to design a crowdfunding campaign, we ask people to pick 3 of the following supporter categories that are most relevant to them. So again, your most loyal supporters and donors, local influencers in your community who may or may not donate themselves, but might be able to put in a good word about what it is that you're doing in your organisation. So that could be influencers on social media, or it could be a local councillor, or someone that works for the Chamber of Commerce, or anything like that. So anyone that's got some clout and some influence locally. Other professional or community contacts. So maybe there aren't many people of high standing in your organisation, but there might be other people who work for partner organisations who have a big following on social media and can help put the word out for you. Staff and trustee contacts, family and friends, suppliers as well. So companies that you spend money with and supply equipment to your organisation can often be surprisingly good for supporting a crowdfunding campaign again. And any other ambassadors online. So what we often recommend is that organisations look at this drop-down list, pick maybe 3 of the supporter categories you can see on screen in green at the moment, and then list 3 to 5 people in each of those categories and say, okay, they're the people we're going to approach first. So before our crowdfunding campaign goes properly live, we're going to create the campaign page, but we're not going to share it with anyone, and we're just going to send emails to those exclusive donors and say, we're getting in touch with you first because you're a loyal supporter of our organisation, and we'd really appreciate it if you could make a donation now or get ready when we do our public launch in a week to share this with everyone. So you're getting all your ducks in a row as much as possible. So some final tips on this, other things to do before you launch your crowdfunding campaign. Create some shareable content. I think Julie mentioned some of this earlier as well about things she wished she'd done prior to launching the campaign. So actually, by the time you're ready to go, you've already created maybe a template email that you can send out to everyone and that your colleagues can use to say, this is our new campaign. Would you be able to support it? Here's the link. Put together some social media posts in advance so that you've got a calendar of content that you can share strategically, like every day across a couple of weeks or something like that, maybe talking about different aspects of your project. So if you are making improvements to a green space, you could, as well as having like direct fundraising messages in there, you could just prepare a few posts that are about the space itself and maybe quotes from people that like it locally. Any interesting facts and figures about the land or the facility or whatever it is. And I think email signatures are really good as well. So when we've worked with organisations to run a crowdfunding campaign previously, we encourage all the staff for all the time that the campaign's live to just add a line to their email signature saying, you know, Lime Green Consulting are currently running a crowdfunding campaign to renovate this community space. Please click here to make a donation. And then every email that every member of staff or volunteer sends will have a little soft message to encourage support again. Other things you can do to really get ready to launch with a splash: countdown to launch on social media as well, create hype and excitement, with the example on the right being the type of thing you could share on social media, saying 5 days to go, 4 days to go, 3 days to go, etc., etc. Plan that communications calendar and social media calendar, as I say, with regular updates, and just ensure that all of your main communication assets are actually ready to use when we go live. And what I mean by this is I've seen organizations that have been really wedded to launching a crowdfunding campaign on a particular day, and then they found that maybe their video isn't ready or their infographic isn't ready, and they've kind of half launched that campaign and made a bit of a mess of it because they're missing a key element. So it's really important to just give yourself time to prepare all of this properly and to make sure that you've got all of those things ready to use so that when you do go live, you can launch with a splash. I'm not actually going to take a quick break there. Apologies, that slide's in the wrong place. I'm going to cover one more thing, which is, so you've built up to your campaign, you're ready to launch. How do you then make sure you're getting as much attention as possible? So firstly, unveil your campaign everywhere you can. I know we've had a couple of questions today from smaller groups that don't have a website, but if you do have a website, make it work as hard as possible to talk about your crowdfunder, publish a news article to coincide with a launch, put a message on your homepage. I know a lot of people have like a banner or a navigation menu across the top, and sometimes you've got the flexibility to edit that, and you can put a big temporary button on there saying support our crowdfunding campaign. It's live until the 30th of April or whatever it is. Send a big email out to your supporter list. Something I'd really recommend, a lot of organizations have like a monthly or quarterly or weekly newsletter where they talk about lots of different topics in one place. And I think it's too easy for your message about crowdfunding to kind of get lost amongst lots of different bits of information and messaging there. So the best thing to do if you're running a major crowdfunding campaign is to send a one-off mailing that's just about your crowdfunding campaign, that just has one short message and a big button at the bottom saying click here to donate. And then that way people don't get distracted by other forms of information, other requests to go to different pages and that sort of thing, and they're just 100% focused on donating to your campaign. Thirdly, launch your campaign on social media. Make use of all of the things you put together, the infographics, the social media posts, the video, etc. Share it all over social media. I think sometimes people can be a bit reluctant and think they're sort of spamming their followers, but really, stuff that we post on Twitter and Facebook will often only stay in people's news feeds for half an hour or two before it's kind of lost behind and below all the fresh content. So I think post regularly on social media. Don't be afraid to keep talking about your campaign to keep it there. And depending on what your organization is and what you do, you might well have other obvious touch points as well. So you might want to put up something on a notice board at your premises, or if you're running any events, you want to talk about your crowdfunder at those events. You want to put it on an internal notice board for staff and volunteers to see, etc., etc. So basically, anywhere anyone goes, they're seeing and hearing about your crowdfunding campaign, and they're hearing about it often enough that they remember and they choose to make a donation. Finally, if you have had pledges through from people before this point, then do chase them up and say, you said you'd make a donation to support our campaign. It's now live. We really need your support. Please can you go on and sort of finalize that donation? And if you have done that network mapping exercise that I mentioned previously, just revisit it and make sure that there's anyone that you've mentioned as a potential contact, you just send a personalized email to. And again, the more personal you can make those emails, the better, and sort of try and massage people's egos a little bit and say, if someone is really well connected in your local community, recognize that in what you're sending to them and say, I think a little mention of our campaign by you will make such a huge difference because you've got a really great following yourself and you've got lots and lots of people who really value what you say, and so we'd really value getting a mention or a share by you. And also, don't forget offline contacts as well. So you might be doing your crowdfunding campaign online, obviously, but there might be people that you rarely talk to online, like major donors or trusts and foundations that have supported your work previously, community fundraisers who maybe do little activities in their local community to raise money for you, like a coffee morning or something like that. And maybe all of these donors and supporters could be persuaded to make an additional contribution towards your crowdfunding campaign. Or maybe you're community fundraising group who do a monthly coffee morning for you could be persuaded 1 month to put the money they raise towards your crowdfunder or something like that. And suppliers, I mentioned previously, it's I think an underused tactic by organisations. But one big crowdfunding campaign I was working on 2 or 3 years ago, they were about £1,000 short of their fundraising target towards the end, and they were just running out of energy and ideas. And one of the trustees suggested, well, what about if we write to all of the people who provide our stationery and our food for our cafe and other places like that, and say, did you know we're running a crowdfunding campaign? Would you be able to make a donation towards it? And I think they got sort of 3 or 4 local companies to give a couple of £100 each, and it actually got them over the line with their target, because I think sometimes these companies have a charitable budget each year and they're willing to put a bit of that towards campaigns. So speaking to your suppliers is really, really helpful as well. And finally, we've already covered influential people in your community, but local and national press as well. I know we're talking primarily about online fundraising here, but as Julie mentioned earlier, a mention on the local radio station, in the local newspaper, can make a huge difference as well. So hopefully there's lots of different avenues here that you can consider to really kind of dial up the noise and awareness about your crowdfunding campaign, and really just make sure that your message about what it is you do and why it's important to support you is appearing everywhere as much as possible. So I think, I'm going to suggest we take a break there for a little while. But before we do, I wanted to throw it open to questions as well. So I'm going to take my slides down for a second and turn my video back on, because it seems to keep on turning off for some reason. Any questions or thoughts, Laura?
Not at the moment. If anyone's got any, then let me know on what you heard so far. Radio is really good. And I know that when Julie Webster was talking to us earlier, she was saying she wished she'd got the recording from Radio Derby before she'd agreed to having the interview. But I think local radio is really good, because I think people forget how many people are actually listening to those, and not just Radio Derby or Radio Nottingham, but the little ones, like, I'm trying to think of the one. There's Every Wash Sound, and these are more over the border into Derbyshire. But I went on a Mansfield radio station once that was just like a local one and advertised steampunk events. Amber Sound is good. Every Wash Sound is good. And these are like people who live locally. The DJs on the station actually live locally. And there's thousands of people, in factories and all sorts of places listening to them that you don't realise.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to talk about the video, because every campaign I'm going on, because I'm being really nosy about campaigns on crowdfunder now. Because I noticed I actually went on at dinner time and looked at some heritage campaigns on there, and I was automatically did exactly what you said. I just looked at the ones that are nearly at their target, and I just ignored the ones that were still on no donations. So that really rang a bell with me. And videos, they've all got videos. There's just a video on every single page.
Yeah, the videos just make all the difference. I think particularly at the moment, we're all just constantly looking at our screens, reading email the whole time, and the last thing we probably want to do is find a really long crowdfunding page that just has loads and loads of written information. So that's where infographics and particularly videos come in so useful. It's just a breath of fresh air, particularly if there's a way to get people like the kids you support or local residents kind of talking about your work on your behalf. I think that's so much more powerful and effective. And you're absolutely right about fundraising targets. I think psychologically we do it, and I think we all want to be responsible as well for getting a campaign over the line. It feels really good when someone's doing one last push and you're like, okay, I'm going to donate now, and that's going to help them get over the line with their target. So that's why we're talking about a two-phase approach really here. We're talking about launching your campaign quietly at first with your best donors and sending the page to them and massaging their ego a little bit and being like, okay, this is an exclusive preview of a campaign. Could you make a donation now? And then hopefully by the time the other 95% of people see it, they're like, wow, you're already at 50% of your target. That's amazing. And that's really effective, but it needs a good bit of planning in advance.
I've just put a link to an app that I've found is really good. It's on Android and Apple. What's the Apple version? It is Apple, isn't it? That's the other one.
Yeah,
Totally. I
iPhone.
want to say Mac, but it's not Mac. It's the same difference. I know what I mean. But in short, apparently it's really good and you can use it on your iPads or your mobile phones and just create your own little videos. I know people have done it for their businesses. So it might be worth, if you want to have a go at it, going on that link and having a look at InShot.
Yeah, and I think there's been a real shift in the last few years towards, more homemade video footage, and it's not even now that it's just as good as sort of amateur as professional video footage, but I think people almost look for it, and I've definitely heard of big companies and even political parties sort of almost deliberately shooting footage on a smartphone, even if they've got high quality video recording equipment, because it just looks more authentic and more sort of engaging in a way. So you absolutely don't need to kind of bring in a film crew or spend a lot of money on an expensive camera. As you say, that app looks really useful, Laura, and you can do it all on your smartphone.
Also, 1 second a day app, Jill says, is really useful.
Brilliant. I haven't heard of that one, actually.
No, I've heard of Snapseed. Snapseed's another good one as well, apparently.
Yeah, there's quite a few there, aren't there?
But the easier, the better.
We're going to take a break in a few minutes, but does anyone else have any other questions or comments they want to share at this point? Brilliant. Okay. Laura, I'm going to temporarily leave and see if I can come back and get my video controls back, because I was hoping to show another video after the break. But maybe if we pause until 2 to 3 and then go again at that point, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine by me. Yep. Okay, everybody. Brilliant. So we'll see you back here at 2 to 3.
Thanks, everyone. See you shortly. Hi, Laura. Just to say I'm back and ready in a moment or so.
Hi, Mike. I've just been looking on Crowdfunder, comparing all the different campaigns.
Oh, and what have you found so far?
I'm actually seeing what you're saying. I'm actually seeing on. It's interesting to actually go in and I just typed in heritage, and all these different projects came up, and then I can actually see what you've been saying about, getting some people to fund it already,
Yeah,
and the ones that have, you can see it. You can see it as soon as you look at their page. The ones that have really thought about it, added a video, directed people to the website, put the rewards on. You
yeah,
can see, and then you click on one that's got got about 5 days left and raised nothing, and you can say, that's why.
yeah. And you do kind of think, well, why would you be the first donor to something like that? The analogy I'd use is a bit like no one wants to be the first person to turn up to a party, do they? And
Yeah,
you want to wait till everyone else is there and having a good time, and you can just swan in. And it's kind of the same with a crowdfunding campaign.
yep, exactly. So it's quite interesting just to go on and see what, don't reinvent the wheel. Go and see what other people are doing, and
Yeah.
just change it and use it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the examples I've used today are all from crowdfunding campaigns from a little while ago, so they're not live now. But I think to do exactly as you say, to just go on a site like Crowdfunder or Just Giving and search for campaigns that are on a similar subject to what your organization does is a really good way to then just be like, okay, what do we like? What do we not like? What kind of stands out as particularly interesting?
Yep, yep.
Cool.
Being too ambitious. There's a in Scotland. They want to build a heritage centre, and they want £70,000 within 35 days, and they've raised 2%.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said this morning. If you're doing it for the first time, I'd start quite small because it's better to succeed with a small campaign than have that tumbleweed moment if you sort of shoot too high.
exactly. Yeah,
Right, I'm going to go again, Laura, if that's okay. And
yep.
happily, I seem to have dialed out and back in again, and now I think I'll have full controls. So don't know what's
Was
don't know
you
what's
was you in the
happening there.
browser instead of the app then? Was you?
I'm now in the app because
Oh, right.
I used the app last week and this morning, but then this afternoon it said I needed a password, but then I just closed it and reopened it. It seems all right now, so hopefully I'll be able to share that video. Sorry about the last one, everyone. I am going to put my slides up just for a moment, actually, because then I want to ask everyone a question. But we're really on to the part of the day where we're saying you've launched your crowdfunding campaign, you've had a good start, but we're at that moment where donations have dried up a little bit, momentum stalling, people's enthusiasm and confidence that you're going to reach your target is just slipping. And as I said at the beginning, I think this normally happens with almost every fundraising campaign. It's very rarely a kind of linear, our crowdfunder has been excellent all the way through. There's always a moment where it goes a bit quieter, and I think being able to kind of skip through that and freshen things up and go for a second push is what really makes the difference and allows you to run a successful campaign. So I would actually like to throw this question over to all of you to either comment in the chat box or turn your audio on for a second and just give us any thoughts. How do we stop this? So let's say you're running a crowdfunding campaign, you're running out of new things to say, donations have dried up a bit. Is there anything you can think to do that would be a good way to kind of get that momentum and that freshness back again? Over to you really briefly to answer that. Any thoughts?
Marisha.
School kids. Get videos of school kids. It's well, for me, I would ask my volunteers and to just to help, with for their ideas, have a video meeting with them. What do you think? We've just got to do this final push and whatever, and they always come back with great ideas.
Yeah.
So
Elizabeth said, report on progress to date. Show people how far you've come.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see lots of great comments in the chat box. Completely agree with you as well, Marisha. I think, you know, asking people for fresh input, particularly if they haven't been involved at that point, and maybe saying, you know, we've only got a little way to go. Is there anything you haven't done yet, or any ideas that you could try now? So completely agree with that. Roger mentioned sort of doing a radio interview as well. Julie said short video interviews with people who have already been given, and saying why and getting them to share, which I think is
That's a good idea.
is a lovely idea as well. Julie says using town notice boards, particularly near schools. Dawn says getting other people involved, those who've been on the ground, which again I think is brilliant. And Jill mentions one of my personal favourites, which is saying thank you for the money raised so far, which I think is really, really important, and I'm going to come back to in a moment. And Julie says sort of reveal of the thermometer as well.
Like baby reveals, like baby gender reveals.
Yeah, I like that. It's unconventional, but it's a good way of grabbing attention. Maybe.
Yeah, can I just to say that Knots TV got in touch with me and Jeannie today, and loved the song, loved the video. Can you appear on the show this Thursday, which we're going to do, and they're going to do it with Zoom for us.
That's good news.
Because Roberto, it was launched at the weekend from Rome, the OK magazine, schools magazine, and what Roberto is going to do after a short while, he's going to, because I asked for the words to be put on the video, because I want people to sing along to it, you know, all over the world. And I said to him, could you get some school kids from your local schools to sing along, and then they can learn English at the same time? He said, yeah, don't worry, I'll get a video over to you of the kids singing along to it. So it's but as I say, I just did a press release after the main press release a week ago, just over a week ago, and I did a short one about the local campaign, which is the end result happening, and Knots TV came straight back, and then once that's on, might get East Midlands TV, and then national, and hopefully Gardener's World with so. You know, so it's keeping the momentum up.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for that, Marisha, and everyone else who commented in the chat box. I think there's some brilliant suggestions there that I'd loosely put in a few categories. So sort of fresh content and a new angle, media attention, progress updates, and saying thank you as well. So I think you've all done a really good job of catching most of my points that I was going to share. I'm just going to come back to my slides for a second here, and as I think it was Jill said, thanking donors is really, really effective, both to show gratitude, but also it's another way of kind of keeping your campaign in the public eye if you do that publicly. And there's also an element of what we call in fundraising social proof as well. So every time you're thanking a donor, you're kind of saying, here's a person out here who's already donated to us, and you're reminding them that the campaign's there, and you're showing that it's active and supported, which is really important. So I am just going to put a couple of things on screen as pictures here. So on the subject of thanking donors, I did, as one of my favourite fundraising blogs that I've written over the last few years, a couple of years ago as an experiment, I made 10, £20 donations to a variety of charities that I like the look of, mostly small and local charities, and just had a look at what happened and what they did next, and how it made me feel, basically. The example on the right is from a local charity here in Bristol who support refugees and asylum seekers called Bridges for Communities, who sent a lovely handwritten thank you card and impact report, and actually I've stayed in touch with them ever since. We've raised quite a lot more money for them, me and my partner, in various ways, and sort of all through the impact of that initial thank you. And as the graph on the left shows, you know, more than half were quite good at saying either an immediate thank you on the same day or within a week, but there were quite a few that took a long time, and actually a couple of those organisations who years on I sort of never heard from. So I think thanking donors can be a really effective way of amplifying your campaign, but just showing gratitude as well. So do it as soon as possible after the donation's been made to your crowdfunder. Do it genuinely, you know, don't just make it a copy and paste message, but think about how you can do it warmly and meaningfully as well. And also think about how you can do it visually and creatively as well. So this is an example of the type of graphic you can put together on social media. So on Facebook now, I've just shown a screenshot here. If you're updating your status on Facebook, you'll just see an arrow pointing towards a little coloured square that has the letter A in it in the bottom left corner. And if you click on that, you can create just a basic thank you message, but has a coloured background, a bit like the one I've put on screen here. And you can say, you know, thank you for your incredibly generous donation of £100 towards our community playground. If anyone else would also like to make a donation, here's the link. So that's reminding people that your campaign's there, and it's also showing some really important gratitude to the people that have already donated. And as it says on the bottom of the screen here, you're not just going to get one-off donors from your best donors. They're not necessarily just going to donate once to your crowdfunding campaign. It's really common that people will make a donation early in the campaign, and then particularly when you're having this final push, you know, potentially go back to them and say, we've only got £1,000 left to raise. Do you know anyone else who'd make a donation? Could you do a shout about the campaign on your social media? And quite often those people will donate again and almost act as informal ambassadors and advocates for your campaign. They'll mention it to their friends, etc. as well. So I personally think thanking your donors is not only the right thing to do, but from a strategic angle sort of enlists people to help you with your campaign. And I'd just again mention Canva at this point as well as a really useful tool for creating basic visual thank you messages, graphics that just stand out a bit more on a social media feed as well. But thanking donors makes a big difference. Some other things I'd recommend doing at this point, if you're having a bit of a lull, obviously keep plugging your campaign on websites, newsletters, social media. You know, it might be that 2 or 3 newsletters go out in the time you're doing your campaign, or you might be able to publish another news article on your website to say, we're 80% of the way there. Can anyone else help us get over the line? As was suggested in the chat box, providing fundraising updates and progress towards your target as well. So if you've just hit 50% or 75%, that's an incredibly positive message to put out in your newsletter or on social media that just helps towards the final push. If you have had any money come in offline, where like a trust or foundation or a supplier has just sent a check, or someone's dropped in with a check to your office, don't forget to kind of acknowledge that money as well. Some crowdfunding platforms will have an option where you can kind of just input on the page to say, oh, we've also received £1,000 offline, and that counts towards your target. If you're running an all or nothing campaign and you're short and you're not going to get any of the money unless you hit your target, but you've received maybe £2,000 in cash or checks from a different source, you've got a little bit of a dilemma, because if you're paying fees on your crowdfunding platform, any money you put through that page is going to incur fees, but you might want to think about just topping up your page yourself with that money you raised offline, if that's going to be the only thing that gets you to your fundraising target. So I think it's important to join back up offline and online fundraising at this point. And think about sharing some new sort of fresh content as well. So there might be key milestones, not so much in your fundraising, but with the project itself. Maybe you've just had planning permission come through, or maybe because you got 75% of the way there with your fundraising, your CEO is willing to say, okay, let's start ordering building materials now, or let's sign the contract with the contractor. And you might also be able to share like a behind the scenes video as well. So again, video content doesn't need to be professional, but it could be with the CEO or a trustee or an ambassador, just doing a final sort of push message. Again, it could be involving a few of the people you support, like children, etc. It could be, you know, recorded on your site that you're looking to improve and saying, this is what it looks like at the moment. If we can just get another £1,000, we'll be able to completely transform this. So really, it's just looking for fresh content that maybe you haven't shared until now, that just gives a fresh dimension and angle as well. And also, I think, as well as talking about successes, also be honest and transparent about the challenges as well. So maybe, you know, some of the the cost of some of the building work you're doing for your campaign has just gone up and you need to raise a bit more, or maybe there's some other like complication in your project that means you have to do things slightly differently now, or it's going to need slightly more money. I think all of those challenges, you know, we all love a story and we love a narrative that sort of has a difficult bit and then a good bit, and it's a bit of a roller coaster ride. So I think just being honest about, you know, anything about your work that's proved a little bit more complicated can still have that human interest value as well. A few people have mentioned sort of local media and radio as well. I think, you know, do make sure you're getting in contact with anyone, particularly if you're nearly there to your target. It might be that the local newspaper wants to get involved at that point, but also maybe look reactively for any media hooks and things that are happening in the news that just give a fresh angle to your campaign. So I know one example I'd give, I've worked previously with a learning disability charity, and quite recently you may have seen that Jo Wiley, who's a radio DJ, started talking a lot in the news about her sister who had learning disabilities, who'd been denied a COVID vaccine for a while and was quite low down the list, and she couldn't understand it, and she started talking about it publicly. And you know, I know several learning disability charities that saw that as an opportunity to say, okay, people are kind of talking and thinking about learning disability at the moment, so maybe we can put a message out there ourselves. So I think it's all very well to plan your campaign in advance, but sometimes you need to look for those unexpected publicity opportunities that just allow you to kind of get an extra shout out and a bit of extra interest as well. And in that final push, just look for donations from all of those surprise sources. You know, if you don't ask, you don't get. So as I've mentioned already, suppliers can be really good for that. Maybe former trustees or former staff members, people that maybe you haven't spoken to recently but might really want to support you with that final push. And finally, let's assume, as sometimes happens, you've got the opposite problem. So rather than needing a final push to just get to your target, maybe you've actually hit your fundraising target a bit sooner than you were expecting. And you might want to just wrap it up there and say, we're very grateful. We don't want to push our luck. We've done what we set out to do and we're done. But if you think there's still people out there who want to donate and your campaign's got good momentum, think about maybe if there's a way to stretch your fundraising target. Some crowdfunding platforms will let you sort of adjust your target and say, okay, instead of raising £10,000, we're now going to increase that to £14,000 because of the phenomenal response we've had to date. And if you're thinking about doing that, I think it's always worth having an additional ask ready to go. So what would you be able to do with £14,000 that maybe you couldn't have done with 10? So that might be about buying an extra piece of equipment or a slightly higher spec van, thinking back to the Pupmobile example, just to kind of squeeze out the last bit of fundraising potential out of your campaign. So it's often a challenge to get over the line, but it's always worth thinking about what if we do better than expected as well. So I hope that's been helpful as a summary of what to do really to kind of squeeze the last mileage out of a crowdfunding campaign. I also wanted to just touch on what to do afterwards and how to sort of build on a success with a campaign as well. So once your crowdfunder's finished, thank everyone for their support, even if perhaps your campaign hasn't been successful. Maybe you haven't raised as much as you wanted, or because it's been an all or nothing campaign, you haven't been able to bank those pledges. That's obviously going to be really frustrating, but from the ashes of that campaign, there's still good that can come from it. So I think one of the difficult things with a crowdfunder is if I'm a donor and I support it, and then I just never hear from that organisation again. I don't know if they hit their target or not. I don't know if they did the project or not, and it makes me much less likely to want to support them in future. So do thank people for their support, particularly if you've been successful, but also if you haven't been, just to say, you know, unfortunately on this occasion we weren't able to raise as much, but we're hoping to try again next summer, and we hope you'll support us again then. That's still a really useful information to share with people. And depending on what platform you've used, you may or may not have collected a decent amount of donor data and consent, but if you do have permission to add people to your mailing list, process gift aid pledges, etc., then do all of that. That can be worth quite a lot of extra money and now in the future. And think about how you follow up appropriately with donors at different levels. So particularly for those people who've maybe surprised you by giving bigger gifts of a few £100s or more. You might want to think about a personalised phone call to them, maybe an invitation to an event, maybe even a meeting with your CEO or your chair of trustees or one of your non-executive directors, just to show that personal touch. Because if people have supported your campaign at a high level, it clearly means a lot to them, and there's a very good chance they're going to be interested to hear how it goes and in supporting you again in future. So following up with people appropriately is really, really important. And then just keep providing updates on your project as it progresses. So I know with a lot of building projects, you might finish raising the money today, but it could well still be another 6 months or more before people can see evidence of that project when whatever it is opens to the public. So keep sending updates in the intervening period. Say to people, thank you for supporting our campaign 3 months ago. Don't forget to look out for this opening on this date. We know you can't see anything yet, but we're still doing loads of work behind the scenes. All of that builds trust and engagement with your supporters for future. And finally, a couple more things to do, which aren't to do with sort of donor care as such, but have a team debrief with any colleagues who've been involved with the campaign, whether you've been successful or not. Is there anything you can learn from any mistakes you've made along the way? Anything you've wished you'd done differently? Any unexpected challenges, etc. And just think about whether there's anything else to do to logically build on your campaign in future. So that could be running another bigger crowdfunding campaign in 6 months, or asking people who donated to now sign up to a regular gift of £10 a month, or whatever it is. There's lots of things you need to do there. And I guess the most important thing of what I'm saying is, obviously most of the benefit of a crowdfunding campaign comes in the immediate money raised, but a really good crowdfunding campaign energizes a community and creates a group of people who are going to be willing to support you in future. So don't get to the end of your campaign and go, thank goodness for that, I need to lie down now, I never want to think about it again, but actually think strategically about how you can keep building those donor relationships in future. And to give you an example of this and a bit of a break for 2 minutes from me talking, there's another video I'm going to try and show now, which hopefully will be more successful than the last one we tried a few minutes ago, because I know not everyone had access to that. This is a campaign, not that we were involved with, but someone in our team of fundraising consultants lives down in Brighton, and there's been a big campaign down there to save the iconic Madeira terraces in Brighton. It's a really big campaign that had a lot of involvement from local celebrities and influencers, so it's maybe a little bit above the scale of what you're doing, but they produced a really nice thank you video for that phase of their project, which again is a couple of minutes long, and I just wanted to show you as an example of a really positive, upbeat message that can kind of help to engage a donor community. So let's see if this works this time. I'm going to do my very best to share this. And Laura, I'm hoping the sound will work, but let me know if it doesn't.
Okay.
This is your seafront. This is part of your city, your heritage, your history.
Madeira terraces are an integral part of Brighton's iconic beachfront. The arches mark the grand finale for all major London to Brighton runs, having featured in movies such as Wimbledon, The End of the Affair, Quadrophenia, and of course Brighton Rock.
Hi, it's Fatboy Slim here. Ever since I first saw Quadrophenia, Madeira Terrace has always been as iconic to Brighton as the Piers, as the Pavilion, the I360, Fatboy Slim, as Muesli itself. It's an icon of our town.
I'm absolutely delighted that we've hit the target, and huge thanks to the businesses, the residents, the organisations, everyone who's donated, pledged, supported, given prizes to the raffle, helped organise the raffle. Really everyone who's supported the campaign since July and has got us to this point. Thank you. From celebrities like Steve Coogan, Fatboy Slim, some of the Albion players who gave their support, to hundreds, if not thousands, of local residents and businesses, and indeed people who've donated from outside of Brighton and Hove, who love the city, who visit here, people who used to live here, people who've made pledges from around the world. This was always part of a way of signalling support for the project from the community. I'm really absolutely delighted that we've hit the target.
Thank you.
There we go. I'll just take that off because it's going to try and autoplay another video again. I hope everyone could see and hear that okay, but it's just oh, I think it is now autoplaying something else. Yeah, there you go. Let me get rid of that. Yeah, just a really nice example of a follow-up message. Marisha said, love the cut-out arches that we used, really effective. Absolutely, it's another example of a real low-budget thing you can do to just sort of get your message out there and look a bit more appealing as well. A couple of lovely comments from people saying they really enjoyed that. But yeah, doesn't need to be high budget, but just a little something extra rather than just saying we've done our campaign, we'll move on to the next thing now. Something that's actually giving something back to the people who supported your campaign and making it far more likely that they'll continue to be a supporter of your organisation in future. So I thought that was a really nice example to show as a different sort of follow-up video. The last thing I wanted to cover, and we will throw this open to questions in a little bit of time, but just in terms of coming back to what's a realistic fundraising crowdfunding target for our organisation and how do we forecast the income we might look to get from a crowdfunding campaign, something that can be really helpful that a few of you may have seen or heard of before is like a basic donor pyramid where you put together something that just tries to anticipate different sizes of gifts that you're going to receive at different levels and how many people might support at those levels. So you might say, I believe this adds up to £5,000 if my maths are correct. So I think this would be quite a small crowdfunding campaign. But to test whether your target seems realistic, you might say, okay, to raise £5,000, we need one high-level gift at £100, 10 gifts at £100, 20 at £50, 50 at £20, and 100 at £10. And then you can start to think about, okay, is that realistic? Do we think we could get more big gifts than that, more in the middle? Do you think we'd struggle to get that many smaller gifts, etc., etc.? And then you can kind of cross-reference this maybe from the network mapping exercise that I mentioned earlier and say, okay, these local influencers, these wealthy donors that we're connected with, let's almost drop them in at different levels of this pyramid. And really, it's just a way of putting some context on your target. So, the principle is not many people will give at a high level, but that will be worth quite a lot of money to your organization, and then maybe lots more people will give at a smaller level. And you can just have a play around with this and say, if we want to raise, let's say, £10,000, how many people would we need to give at different levels to make that realistic? So that can be a good way of just forecasting the income you'll get from a crowdfunder. Just a reminder, really, for those of you that are doing budgeting for crowdfunding about something I mentioned right at the top of the day, which was the cannibalization effect. So obviously, if you're running a crowdfunding campaign, staff might be putting more time into that than something else. Donors who might have otherwise given to your organization anyway for something else are going to restrict their donations to this campaign, etc., etc. So, yes, your crowdfunder is maybe going to raise £10,000, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every penny of that is completely new income to your organization. It may be that you temporarily raise a bit less in other areas just because of the focus and the energy that has gone on crowdfunding. So that's just something to bear in mind if you are trying to accurately forecast the income that will come from your crowdfunder. Right, what I'm going to suggest doing now, we're going to throw this open to further questions and comments in a few minutes, but just to give everyone a short break and also to try and get some of the feedback that I know Laura and I are really keen to get, and Laura needs to report back on this training because obviously she's had funding for it. I'm gonna come back to a couple of those slides in a minute, but we are just going to give everyone a link to a feedback survey because that's the main content from today completed now. We're going to ask you to take 5 minutes now to just have a short pause, fill in the online survey, which is just on Google Forms. It shouldn't take more than sort of 2 or 3 minutes to do, hopefully. You can tick various tick boxes at the bottom if you want to receive all of the resources from today. And also I've mentioned a few times today, our blog, our podcast. We also have a set of 10 free fundraising help sheets on our website. website. So if you tick the box at the bottom for that, if you haven't done already last week, then I'll make sure you get all of the follow-up resources from that. So we're just going to take 5 minutes. If everyone could fill in that survey, please, that would be great. And then I'm going to come back in a few minutes and just recap on a couple of final things and throw it open to questions. So Laura, I think I've got the link here. Yes, I have. So that survey link, if you haven't got it already, it's just appeared in the chat box for everyone. If you could just take a few minutes to fill that in. Laura, it might make sense, I guess, to stop the recording here and then we'll do questions at the end, not recorded, or up to you really.